The orc hits you for 7 points of damage. Now, why did the chicken cross the road? To get to the other side.
What are you guys doing?
Playing an April Fool's adventure.
Can I watch?
Sure. Alright, Delta. You hit the orc for 10 points, dropping him. So, a guy in a restaurant asks, "Waiter, what's this fly doing in my soup?" The waiter replies, "It looks like the backstroke."
Wait, are you just telling jokes between dice rolls? That's not how April Fool's adventures work. You have to tie the jokes into the theme of the adventure.
Fine. Okay, Delta, you've defeated the orc, but to get through the next door you have to answer a riddle. What do you call a grotesque, disembodied head that can destroy anything with only the sound of its voice? I don't know either, but it's standing right behind you.
Alright, that does it. Good morning, everyone, and welcome back. Before I get started with my new series developing a setting with my players for the upcoming MCDM RPG, I wanted to make a Dungeon Master Tips video to celebrate the holiday. No, not Easter, the other holiday, April Fool's Day. 20 years ago, a friend of mine and fellow Dungeon Master received a copy of Dungeon Adventures number 109 in the mail, and he couldn't wait to tell me about one adventure in particular. It was called The Devil Box, and it was a hilarious read. From the miniaturized chain devil, to the antics of the kobold tribe, to the divination question, do chickens feel pain, it was a great laugh for dungeon masters. But the more I read, the more I realized how little of this humor players would actually see. The vast majority of the comedy was behind the scenes, for DM eyes only. And so I asked myself, what would an April Fool's adventure for players look like? From there I started gathering ideas for such an adventure. Years later, I would get to put those ideas into practice as part of my Unrest campaign in the adventure No Pun Intended. And with April Fool's Day upon us again, I'm preparing another comedy adventure, this time for my Broken Chain setting. So if you want to run an April Fool's adventure for your own group, here are a few tips to get your funny bone in motion. Before running a comedy adventure for your group, you absolutely, positively need one thing: buy-in from everyone participating. If you have a more stoic gaming group, or players that prefer the occasional joke to a long-running gag, they may not be interested in such an adventure. But if part or all of your group is willing to give it a go, then it's time for some serious fun. Something you'll need to decide early in your preparation process is whether to run a one-shot comedy adventure or add some humor to your existing campaign. While April Fool's adventures lend themselves well to one-shots, introducing one into your campaign can add a much-needed change of pace, and it isn't as hard as you might think. While all fictional role-playing requires some suspension of disbelief, a comedy session within an established game turns that up a notch. But by using story elements such as mass hallucinations, collective dreams, illusions or wild magic, or travel to another dimension, you can unleash a slew of gags on the player characters without ruining the continuity of your game. One of the first ways you can inject some comedy into your adventure is with one-time rules changes. In a one-shot, the players can get in on the joke by creating the most off-the-wall characters imaginable, but this is only the beginning. One of the most entertaining rules changes I've seen online for comedy adventures is replacing dice rolls for skill checks with Cards Against Humanity white cards. Obviously, this option leaves the success of any check up to DM interpretation, but it's how you describe the outcome of the check that really matters. In No Pun Intended, the party tiefling wandered up to a magical crabapple tree whose apples literally turned into crabs. He attempted to befriend one of the crabs with an animal handling check and drew the card Not Wearing Pants. This led to an impromptu circumcision on the tiefling performed by the crab. What rules you decide to change for the sake of comedy are up to you and your players, but as long as you all have fun with it, there's no limit to the antics you can have. When running an April Fool's adventure, it's best to treat it like a linear or one-shot adventure, even if it's part of an ongoing campaign. Most of what you include in such an adventure won't be adaptable to your regular games, so you should keep diverging paths to a minimum to reduce your workload and help the party complete the adventure in a single session. This means presenting the goal of the adventure up front. This can take the form of an NPC sending the party on a quest, a stolen item the PCs must recover, a kidnapped victim for them to rescue, or any other situation found in more traditional adventures. But what makes it an April Fool's adventure if you're just using standard adventure design techniques? Presentation. Humor is the heart and soul of any April Fool's adventure, but it can take many forms. You may decide to stick to medieval or fantasy-themed jokes in your session, especially if it's part of a campaign. But if you've used one of the integration methods I mentioned earlier, then you can incorporate pop culture references into the adventure without any jarring discontinuity errors. Such references can simply be explained away with, "Those mushrooms could have killed you, so be glad you only had to reenact a Monty Python skit." D&D memes and metagame humor are also good sources of humor in such a game. Facing off against an evil wizard who utters the cliche, "I don't care how big the room is, I said I cast Fireball," can be both tense and comedic. For no pun intended, I had the party stumble across some tracks in the woods, only for them to realize after hearing a vague description that they were train tracks. I followed up with the line, "You followed the tracks. You have to. It says so in my notes." To which one of the players responded, "Are we being railroaded?" with a laugh. This brings up an important point when creating April Fool's adventures, and for adventure design in general. Don't expect a particular response from your players when presenting them with a joke or encounter, or any response at all. They could simply ignore it and move on. Remember, they're not the straight man in your comedy act, they're the audience. Your joke should almost always be delivery and punchline all in one. Even something as simple as a knock-knock joke can be thrown off course when another person is involved. Like any good adventure, you'll need a variety of encounters for your April Fool's session. Puzzles may not be the easiest type of encounter to create, but you do have some leeway regarding the complexity of the puzzles in a comedy adventure, as my Unrest players discovered. The party faced off against a mysterious sphinx and had to answer its riddle to pass, only to be asked, "Who's that Pokemon?" Your own puzzles can be equally as ridiculous and should still fit just fine into the comedic theme of the adventure. Fighting monsters is another important part of adventuring, and comedy adventures are no different. But this is an opportunity to throw your own off-the-wall creations at the party. For the final battle of no pun intended, the PCs faced off against the BBEG, Bartimaeus Banderas Aetherius Gwent, and his giant rubber mallard monstrosity, the Quacken. I even threw in a few special attacks such as Water Gun, Feather Duster, and Squeak to keep the battle both interesting and humorous. I would give more examples of joke monsters to use, but as Dungeon Masters, I'm sure you've come up with your own hilarious ideas for pun-based creatures. You wanted to include them, but couldn't find a way to do so in a regular game without drawing the humorless ire of your players. Now is your opportunity. Search your feelings. You know it to be true. Mwahahaha. One finishing touch you can use in an April Fool's adventure is an innocuous reference at the beginning of the session which ends with a punchline at the conclusion of the adventure. I'm planning something fairly simple to use for my Broken Chain comedy adventure, Eldritch Fool's Day, but what I did for no pun intended was far more elaborate. The party started on a colossal stone bridge called the Span, which stretched across a nameless ocean. Shortly after, they arrived at the town on the Span, which my teenager happily agreed to draw for the session. The courthouse in Span Town was run by 3 judges known as Inquisitors, including Inquisitor Judy, based on the television personality Judge Judy. At the end of the adventure, when the party had defeated the Quacken, Bartimaeus Banderas Aetherius Gwent tried to escape, but was cornered by the 3 Inquisitors as they burst into his castle. His response was, "I never expected the Spanish Inquisition." Although everyone at the table understood the reference, one of the players didn't know where the Spanish part came in. That was until another player pointed out that they were from the Span. I'm pretty sure the first player took real-life psychic damage at that point. And there you have it. Practical tips for running an impractical adventure. I hope you'll take this advice and run your own April Fool's adventure for your group in order to inject some humor into their overly serious adventuring career. Until next time, I'm David Watches.
And I'm Nepal Man. Dave, not funny.
And thanks for watching. Special thanks to my longtime friend Bill Batchelor for creating the logo for this channel, and to Dylan Smith for the character art used in this and other videos. I couldn't have done it without them.
For more gaming tips, check out these hot videos.